Hi, I'm Debbie.
And I'm Nikki, and we are Panoba Education Consultants, and we help families from all over the world to find boarding schools in the UK.
Mainly in the UK, but we have been known to go elsewhere.
We have. But today we wanted to talk to you about something that a lot of clients ask us about, and it is a very important question, and that is diversity in British boarding schools. So, I mean, there are over 400 boarding schools. Many of them are in towns and cities where you might expect it to be more diverse, but others are out in the countryside. So I think if you're coming from, as a lot of our clients do, from Africa and from the Middle East, you do want to know, and Asia, you do want to know that there are going to be other students in the school from other parts of the world. And I suppose for parents it's important to feel a school has that global outlook.
Yeah, I think diversity is a great conversation to have today, and I think for us to be able to share what we've learned over the last 10 years, sort of a go behind the scenes and let you know how schools do go about recruiting, because they also want to be seen very much as global. They are British boarding schools, but they do want to be global. They do want to have diversity, and they go to great lengths, not just working with educational consultants like ourselves, but also, going to fairs all over the world to try and recruit students into their schools. So they really do spend a lot of time looking at their numbers, and there are percentages, dare we say, some schools maybe decide to stick to sort of 10, 11, 12% overseas, and some a little bit more.
Some more. I would say generally maybe between sort of 12 and 20% of a school population.
But they do want to keep them as sort of British boarding schools, because that is what families are paying for. They're paying to have a British education in the predominantly sort of British environment, etc.
It's getting the balance, isn't it? I think
it is, but there are international schools here. They could choose, come here, go boarding and be in an international school. Maybe that would be IB or the American curriculum, and you can do that in the UK as well, by the way, if you didn't know. We'll have to do a video on that.
I think what we see behind the scenes is that, and particularly at this time of year, September, October, November, there are fairs held all over the world, education fairs, and admissions teams from British boarding schools will go and attend those fairs. And the idea is that they're going to meet other agents, educational consultants that represent different parts of the world, in order to encourage students to come from that part of the world. And the important thing is that they get a really broad mix. So you don't want too many of any one nationality.
They cap. Yeah.
So the idea is that you get, that very good mix within the school community.
And I think also bringing a real diverse community together in a British boarding school, especially with the current climate today in the world, political issues, etc. It's a real neutral ground where, the younger they are, the better informed they're going to be growing up, knowing that they've been to school with another kid from another country, which maybe they had an opinion about, and actually they got to boarding school and they've realised, oh, okay. And I think that is a really unique selling point and a unique part of coming to the UK, going to a fantastic boarding school, or any boarding school for that matter. UK has amazing boarding schools, but there are boarding schools all over the world. I just think diversity is a big part of how we go about supporting and helping our families choose the right school.
I think the other important thing is that schools are very keen, what we've seen is that they're very keen to have this international, to sort of be an international player and be on the global stage, because actually what they're doing is educating children for the future, and they know that those children will be going into jobs all over the world,
like and a model UN.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that you've had that interaction during your school days with different cultures, with different ethnicities, so that you can go out into the world and work anywhere and interact with anybody. And I think that all starts in the school environment.
It does.
Really.
There are some of those round square schools. Do you remember the round square schools?
Yes,
we worked with some of those. We should do maybe
that'll be a separate
video on round square schools. So yes, diversity, if you're concerned about that, or if you have that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about coming here with your children, we absolutely want to be able to reassure you and give you...
We'll always ask that question, won't we? I think sometimes, if an international family is approaching a school, or they're going to look at schools in the UK, they're not always confident to ask those questions about what are your international numbers? How many other children do you have of this particular nationality? And I think using an educational consultant is great for that, because we've asked those questions many, many times, haven't we? In fact, it's often the first question we'll ask. So we're happy to do that.
So we want to talk about, I like this one. What have parents asked us?
We've had a lot of questions, haven't we?
Not even actually
involving diversity.
necessarily talk about everything parents have
No.
asked us.
I tell you what comes to mind for me. Do you remember, it was actually years ago, but we had a Muslim family who came to us. They were actually from Nigeria. And the mother was very insistent that her daughter should not have to go into a school chapel building. Now, we did have a long conversation around this because we did explain that actually most schools in the UK were founded hundreds of years ago, and they were founded on a Christian foundation. However, moving forward to today, that doesn't mean that they necessarily practice Christian principles all
religions,
the time. Every religion is respected, and I think it's the values that are common to every religion, really, that are sort of spoken about when the school comes together and has an assembly. Normally, the chapel buildings are the largest areas in the school, so they make an ideal spot
can hold all the
for having
in one
for having an assembly. So often they're used for more, a secular service, for an assembly. A school will talk about values rather than values from any one particular religion. So we did have a conversation with her, but actually she insisted that that was very important to them as a family, and that she didn't want her daughter to go into a chapel building. And as educational consultants, it's our role.
That was quite a unique search, wasn't it?
To listen to that and to respect a family's wishes. And it took a little bit more searching because most schools do have chapel buildings, but we did come up with something.
I think we've always viewed ourselves as being educational consultants, but sort of solving problems, finding solutions to concerns that parents have. And if this is a concern, as in going to chapel, I mean, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're not religious at all, it really doesn't matter, because I think schools are for all religions and none. And we've heard that phrase a lot. So I think there's a lot of reassurance there for parents. I just think parents need to understand that, if a child's going away to boarding school, and let's say they are 13 or 14, they've already had 13, 14 years at home. They know who they are. They know their values. They know their family values. They know their religion, if they are religious. So we're also confident in knowing that there's going to be no swaying. There shouldn't be any concern about having to sit in a chapel. You don't have to pray or take communion or do anything like that might happen in a chapel. Most assemblies happen in chapels.
Yes.
Or the weekly announcements or awards, or somebody got their colours in a sports thing. So I just think chapels can be big places. They can also be quite small places.
The important message for parents is that every religion can be supported.
Yeah, be assured.
So even, some
it was the other family who wanted to keep Ramadan.
Yes.
They were really concerned with certain holidays, one being Ramadan. It's 40 days, therefore how are their children being supported? And schools have been amazing. They're amazing.
They will always support Muslim students with Ramadan and with providing food. Obviously it's after the school evening meal time, but food is put aside. And
they celebrate, Diwali. Didn't we have an Indian family from Dubai?
Oh yeah, I think every religious festival is celebrated within schools. I think that's really important. Yeah. But, if you need to have different prayer times, that can always be accommodated. So I think our role is always to work with parents on these concerns.
To hear the concerns and find a solution.
Yeah, and find a solution and find a school that can support.
Should we have called ourselves Panoba Solutions? Just thinking maybe. No. Okay, but I hope that could reassure some parents who might be watching this regarding that.
Yeah.
Some parents actually who aren't religious at all and actually don't want to send their children to a school where there might be an emphasis on religion. And I think that's important for us to know, because then there are some schools that are less steeped in religion, and therefore we would be leaning towards those. There are so many choices, and there are so many areas, and that is why we always say not every school suits every kid, because every family is different, every child is different. So we have to bear that in mind, really. All right, and finally, one we've been dying to do, tips for parents.
Yeah, most importantly, if you are a parent and you're international and you're thinking about British boarding schools and diversity is a concern and something you're worried about or would like to ask more questions about, what tips can we give you to
dive
in
right
terms of
in,
your search?
Nikki, dive right in. Go on.
Well, I think I suppose there is a difference between schools that are rural or urban. I guess if you're at a school that's nearer a big city, the likelihood is, I suppose, that school would be more diverse. But it's not always the case, is it? I think we've seen some schools in the countryside that we walk in expecting no diversity, and actually they are incredibly diverse.
International diverse. But maybe parents have chosen that school due to the location because they want it, maybe in their mind, being rural, rolling hills and lots of sheep means security, safe, and no access to, I don't know, Starbucks or popping down to the shops. So there is that. There is
yeah, and I think ask the question as well. Ask the question of schools, because of course they all have statistics on diversity. So asking, how many children that they have from perhaps your part of the world is a key part of it as well. Yeah. And if you are concerned about worship, I think asking how your religion is supported within the school and outside of the school, because often, there are places of worship that may be close to the school and the school can make arrangements.
A good example of that is a Christian school. I mean, many of them are, but with a Catholic family. So they particularly want that school. They couldn't get the Catholic school, and there are Catholic schools, because they want the Mass. But there's normally going to be a local, out of the school, Catholic school. So again, it's all about working with the family. It might be a particular school, but it doesn't do that particular service that the parents are looking for. So schools are pretty flexible and pretty brilliant about supporting what parents need.
I think in terms of food as well, often that's a concern that, are the school able to provide particular foods, or how will the school manage it if your child can't eat particular foods, which I think is more relevant. And again, I would say
food is a big issue.
Yeah, it's a big issue. Yeah, it really is.
We always follow up with our parents and our students after they've started, and we always get conversations about the food. Some kids are going, yeah, it's fine, great, and other kids, possibly coming from different backgrounds and different countries, going, it's a bit bland. So it's very difficult, and I think we've even, advised families before to maybe take some sort of spices with them, or so the kids can have a little something to sprinkle on their food if they're allowed.
We actually, do you know what, that just brings to mind, we went on a school visit.
We did,
last week, and we were invited to have lunch. And this school's a bit unusual in that they don't have a central dining room, so all the dining takes place in the houses. So we were invited into one of the boys' boarding houses to sit with the boys at lunchtime, and we were each put at a different table, weren't we? So there were some great boys at my table, and we had some really good conversation. But I did notice that the boy next to me had brought his little jar of spice, and there he was
sprinkling it on.
I think he was
so bland.
He was from Hong Kong, I think, and I said to him, "Oh, you've brought that with you," and clearly he brought it to every meal and just sprinkled. He said, "Oh yes, it just gives it a bit more flavour," he said. So I thought the food was very nice as it is, but I was think
really hoping that the chef in the kitchen
you need a little
bit that. That wouldn't be the wouldn't be the best.
But there he was with. So I thought that was brilliant. That was brilliant.
Another thing I think parents ask us, or should ask us, is it possible, or do we know any? Have we placed that school before? If we have, we will absolutely ask if that parent could speak to you. That would reassure you. And secondly, that schools have lists and are quite often happy to share, with permission of that family, another family, maybe from the same country, who's already started at that school. And that's quite reassuring and quite nice to know. So there's so many things that you might like to ask us and tips that we could tell you. If you enjoyed the content on this video,
that's the bit we have to say, isn't it?
Yes.
Please subscribe and like and share.
And drop a comment.
And watch out for our other videos as well, where we'll be talking about British education for international families.